Yeah, the recording is ongoing.
Can you see the full screen?
We can see, yes, now we can see the full screen, and it's all yours now.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I can't see them. That's very strange.
You can only see me, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, wait a second. Let's do this way.
Yeah, that's better.
Good.
So hi, I'm Shubharti Guha. I'm based in London. And I think today's lecture, I prepared it for you guys, and it's called A New Window. And I think the lecture should be read more as a, today's lecture should be read more as a philosophy in architecture. And that's why I've split it into three parts. The first part is about the fundamental philosophy. The second part is about kind of steps that engage us into architecture. And I'll show you some examples with some of my buildings. And then the last part has got some references of theater projects at Zaha. But, and I think the target would be that none of your projects should look like that. They should look different. So I put those examples, but not giving too much into how they were done. So let's start. And I think I will start with a generic question. And this is where I want you guys to speak up a little bit. And the question is, why do we build? And I would like at least 2, 3 answers from you guys. So anyone can speak up. So why do you think we build?
Okay.
Anyone? Anything? Just throw in. It doesn't have to be correct.
Did you hear that? Somebody said shelter.
Shelter, yes, that's correct. One of the reasons. Anything else?
Remembrance.
Sorry?
Remembrance.
Memory, yes, very good. Anything else?
In our daily life basis.
For your daily functions, okay. Okay, I think we've got somehow a kind of 2, 3 items, but let me try and put this together. So the genesis of architecture is not because of man. It goes back, as you said, because of shelter, because of protection against the weather, because of in search of food or hiding from predator. So these are the very basic fundamental reasons why, before even intelligence arrived, that we started to build. And so what I'm really saying is that the condition to building exists in us without intelligence. So we are conditioned to build. Whether you had intelligence or you didn't, you would build. And that's one of the biggest forms of, let's say, the buildings that were then built, we don't see them because they were based on this, what I'm called the DNA of aspiration. So they were only designed for themselves, so they didn't survive for a long time. They were only there for their lifetime, like a bird's nest and so on. And then after the life was over, or whenever the necessity of the function was over, it merged into the surroundings, right? So there was no choice until humans came along. The second layer of intelligence came along. But then one of the other aspects of this to notice is that this intelligence, when passing through the DNA, even though it was the same set of intelligence that was passed from the mother bird to the children bird because it was in the DNA, but still they were experimenting. And that inherent learning of experimentation is imbibed in all of you, in all of us, without the sense of intelligence. So, so as I said, no two fish have the same home. So, so the destination to experiment is preconditioned. And that's why we see that whether it was the birds or even, Durance tried to gather these building typologies together, that you see these variations after variations coming along. So then came the idea that someone said remembrance, and that came because of intelligence. So we realized that we are building these things and they are, not there. And the second layer of intelligence that needs to be passed on became very difficult because it's not part of the DNA and it can only be transferred through some kind of knowledge base. So whether it could be texts or it could be architecture. So there's an issue with the text. So then first go through this. Then that level of permanence came from, the early forms of Greek architecture, for example, were very much derived from the wooden structures. So, all the designs, even though they were built in stone, you can see that the designs reflected the purlins, the rafters, the sloping roof, even though they didn't need to. But because it was a kind of an inspiration from the transition of what they were building in wood into a much more permanent structure, which was the concrete or stone. So, why architecture? Why not just have documents and that's it? Why transfer of knowledge needs architecture? Because it is the only tangible truth. So when you go and visit a building, you want to know how it is built, and that knowing is there for you, and everybody who's going to come can see that. And you don't need literature to understand how the structure is standing. It's quite easy that these are the logics and that therefore it's standing. However, if I had to document these in history, it can be rewritten in many ways. So if there is no tangible reality, I can write history in the way whoever is in power and whoever wants to dictate their terms. So therefore, history in the long term, let's say 200, 500 years, can be delusional. Therefore, architecture remains one of the only truths that carries through centuries our knowledge. So this, as you can see on the top right, so people took firstly a lot of effort, and I think one of you said functions, but on the left you can see the building construction, what we imagine happened in the Stonehenge, but this building construction in the Stonehenge was not built for shelter. So not necessarily architecture was being built for shelter, but it was being built to pass on a certain set of aspirations. And on the right-hand side, you can see the early city on the top in ancient Egypt called Luxor, and how the curved walls are there. And then you see a bottom image of Dieste, who is a very 20th century architect, late modern architect, who's continuing this experimentation in different forms. But you can see the relationship, and this is across 3,000 years, you see the progress. So in between the 3,000 years, you could say there were very little progress in this typology, in this methodology. So that is what I mean in terms of growth of architecture. So therefore, when you put together, it's not just function, it's not just shelter, it's an inherent doctrine of human aspirations when you look at architecture across centuries. So that's, let's say, the first half of my talk, and hope it's making sense. Then comes the next question. If that is the case, and if the true spirit of architecture lies in this transfer of knowledge and in this experimentation, so what are the things to look out for the spirit of architecture? And that's where I call it the pneuma of architecture, which traditionally translates into spirit. And for the first chapter, which I'm going to talk to you about today, is the second half of the lecture. It's about that individual spirit. What does it mean to have that relationship between space, between architecture and us? That's the first thing that you should know when you're designing. So first thing out of this chapter is object and space. So there is, for example, if we have a site or if we have space, let's call it space, and I put an object in the space. Therefore, the object is balanced in space and I'm looking at the space. Now, for example, I move the object in the space. This changes everything. This changes your perspective of space inside there. This changes where the object is. It's the same object. But it also opens up something more. It opens up a possibility that doesn't exist. Because we are used to seeing symmetry, and you know, if you study Gestalt principle, it opens up the possibility in your imagination when you experience space that perhaps there is a invisible space that I'm part of, which is more than the object and the space that I see. So I think this is a very key understanding of object and space. The space, the object, the space, the position of object in space, and the extension of space based on how you configure objects in space. So this leads to, now if you look at humans very closely and we say, okay, we have the intimate space, the personal space, the social space, and the public space. And these spaces exist in most buildings. You know, there is a transition, there's sometimes juxtaposition, sometimes you enter directly from intimate to public, sometimes you have phases. And these are the games, or these are the tools that an architect has to create that experience in the space. And therefore, the space can be broken up, split up with larger understanding of these different relationships to humans in this case. So which leads to the second chapter, which is once you have these kind of objects that you want to design in space, what do these objects become? And the first thing that the objects start to become is based on your articulation. So whatever is your articulation starts defining the object, and hence the space. So there are many articulations. Most of the time in centuries, people have articulated because of doors and windows and so on. And so do we now. And there are different versions of works. These are some of the works that I have done in different projects. And you can see the articulation is quite drastically different. Usually, most of the time, there's a mistake that articulation leads to style. Or is documented as style, but I don't think that's very important, what style it is. I think the articulation itself is important. The experimentation with the articulation, which gives you the form. And therefore, you would see more articulations. So you can see on the left, something has been tested at a small scale in a restaurant that goes again to become the Daxian Airport on the right-hand side in a larger scale. So once you've mastered your version of articulation, let's say whatever you're going to design and so on, the next requirement for architects is the art of precision. You cannot build buildings without being precise. And this is quite important. You know, the challenge of translating imagination into a construction and a building lies in the art of precision. So you cannot, you know, I know there's a very big culture in universities to fake it, and I went to university, but I think the precision in reality is what gives you the leverage to create spaces that are for the future, that haven't been designed before, that haven't been done before. So, but this principle of precision is not new. So you can see here on the top, in around 200 and 321 BC, in the Mauryan Empire, they carved a stone of granite, which is one of the hardest rocks. And the precision of this polished granite is 0.003, which is much more precise than a laser cutter. So this aspiration to be precise has been there for thousands of years, no matter what technique you use. Today, you can use grasshopper, before that, and cut laser, and before that, people did it by hand. But I don't think any great building can be achieved without precision. So one of the masters, one of the things that I always say, that the straight line has been the greatest invention. It does not exist in nature. And the role of the architect is never to replicate nature, but to be inspired from nature and be able to create something that doesn't exist in nature. So moving on, I'm going to show you a project, and I'm going to straight dive into this project in Milan that I did years ago. And you can see here that we have created these tool system. First, we had the design, and then we have created this tool system to be precise enough and give the design more formal logic and shape and so on. And as you can see, everything is different. So you see the two blue curves. One defines how the building twists, the top one. So it is a non-standard twist. So it twists more in the middle and then goes up straight. And the bottom one divides drives the floor plates actually increase from top to bottom. So bottom to top. So basically there are two logics in play, and that is all scripted through, in those days, RhinoScript and the angles and so on. And all of this was generated by a tool. And therefore you can see here, and this is a video that tells you that how these curves were plotted, how they kind of stack up, and how the curves are generated for the flow plates and so on. And I'm going to move a little bit fast. It's a long video, but you can see, the center point. And as soon as these are developing, these flow plates, the division of the facade here, the optimized division, how much can you make it more economic and efficient and so on, of the glass panels. So this gives us, we don't have to worry too much about the numbers that it's throwing out, as much as we need to worry about the logic. So if your logic is true and clear, the numbers can get way more complex. I think there's a video that's getting stuck a little bit. For some reason. Okay, but anyway, okay, let's see. Okay, sorry about that, but ideally I want to show you that how this progresses. And you can see there's columns. There's the columns are straight floor to floor, not twisted, which gives us the outer scale. But you can see the bunch of numbers that's coming out. You could not possibly do this manually. And there's a double layer of glazing system, the fixed system, the ventilated system on the right, which is open. And this gives us the overall logic to build these kind of buildings. And of course, this building was designed, the twist was not just a whims. It was based on, there's a linear axis in Milan that this takes into account, and then the axis terminates at this footprint, and then you take the axis and it kind of disappears into the sky. That was the initial concept of how it started. But moving on to the next slide. So once, as I said, these areas and so on, they are coming out of the system to make our lives easier. So we can focus more on the design making sure that we are getting the right product, and these kind of logics then get applied across to different designs, but not in exactly the same way. So coming to the final conclusion bit of the second chapter is second part of this lecture is what I call a new window. And this is what the lecture is titled. And I think the new window, or looking for a new window as you become architects, is the first principle. If I had to pick one thing that I would advise is, how do you find a new window? By new window, I don't mean an actual window, by the way. A new window is a new window to your vision. Okay. So which means that, let's analyze quickly one of the old buildings called the Pantheon. Okay. I'm sure a lot of you have been there, you've seen it. Pantheon, before Pantheon, there were many domes built, and the compression structure of the dome sits right in the center that gives it its stability, which was removed from the Pantheon. To give this window, I'll call it whatever you want to call it, the oculus, the window, to give this window this natural light, the experience of having the central light coming in naturally, rain, light, and so on. So that little philosophy chain had to be improvised to find 10 different solutions of how you could build a dome without this keystone, the central stone, which then led to, having thicker walls, as you can see here, thicker walls of concrete. So the dome was built in concrete, thicker walls of concrete at the bottom, thinner as you go up, so that, you taper, you redefine structure. So the new window, or call it, in this case, literally a window, but in generally, if you have a new aspiration, it defines everything else from structure to the philosophy of, you can see in the picture that how the light, the position of these articulations are moved more and more up. So when the shadow falls, you get deeper shadows at the top and lighter shadows at the bottom. So this whole kind of, it's all about the experience of space. And then, you have to invent a dome like this to break away from what we call is, standardization. As we discussed in the first half of the lecture, that, repetition or standardization is not the way forward. It may be useful for today, but it has no meaning in a whole perspective on human settlement. So I want to show you a couple of projects in a little bit more detail, and I'd like to explain a little bit the differences of this project. This is a new project opened in December, but I worked on it for a very long time. I've shown this many times before. This is in Riyadh Metro Station, but here you can see the articulation that creates the outside and the inside, and this whole technology of how you make a window, which is not in a wall, which is part of a diagrid, steel diagrid, and then you kind of design a new system that gives you this effect. Of course, it's a train station, so just briefly, it has, the metro line going here, the entrance at the bottom, the transfer level, and the airport line on the top. And the site was very tight, and that's why you see these bulges coming out, because to make enough space on the interiors. And what the second thing we did is we removed vertical structures here, and we made them inclined so they can combine with the escalators. And once they are combined, you have more efficient space, and you get more double height so that it doesn't feel very cramped. And therefore, you see some of the actual pictures. But here again, you see the precision. You see the geometry has been subdivided to make it into smaller pieces. Then they're charted, they're documented. This is the background knowledge that goes into this kind of building. And you can only do this because it's not been done before. So to do things that you have not been done before, you need to find ways, your own ways, on how to make it work. And here is the result. So this is, just before the opening, and, it's very successful, a train station. So now I want to show another building that I did for my own
We
company.
look for constant inspiration in nature, studying the continuity of its curves and the complexity of its surfaces. Translating such forms into buildings is a challenge. High-end computation can make it simpler to analyze and construct around the world. Forms with structures that are proud to reveal themselves. Forms that create new lived spaces.
So this is one of my other buildings, but I want to share with you that this goes into the logic where structure, form is the architecture. Yet at the same time, it starts by creating that new kind of window. And you create this architecture in a way that it is pure in the way it is. There's no false ceiling, there's no, there's not too much going on. And obviously the tool helps. But even sometimes, for this project, I give you an example because this was done in India, that, we had all the tools to make it work. We could highlight every position, every node had its own point and geometry and coordinates. But we found it easier because this was being built at top of a 5-story building of a hotel, and the labor was not that skilled at the time. This was done, over 10 years ago. And sometimes, so what we did is we asked them to build a thread model. So the laborers went on site and did a thread model because these are all hyperbolic surfaces. So they could draw straight lines to create double curvature on thread. And once they did that, you didn't need to tell them much how to build it anymore. So we talk a lot about construction drawings, and we talk a lot about digital technology, but I think sometimes architecture, building new architecture, is also about communication. How do you communicate to people who are executing? And that brings you to, again, another new window. So here you can see it's a window to the city. It's a framing. I mean, very close to this is the Taj Mahal, which is a world wonder. But then you can see it from the left corner. But the idea that the structure, the facade, the building, is all one is another way of looking at things. So saying that, I will close this lecture with the last is the layer of references of theater, because I know your subject is theater this year. I hope you will not design anything that looks like any of these theaters that I'm going to show you, so that we can see a new window from you guys. Just a little bit of history of Zaha Hadid Theatres is that, we started the Cardiff Opera House, which we won the competition 3 times, but we never got the commission. So we won it first, it was rejected. We won it second time, they decided to host another competition. We won it the third time, and finally they just gave it to someone else. But here it is, very important milestone, because it, even though we never built it, it was part of the recognition in the early 90s. These are some of the forms. After that, there are different kind of theaters that are smaller, temporary. This is a Bach Chamber Music Hall that we did in Manchester. It was a small event inside the main event, creating a temporary space, and how to make the space in the space become a volume in itself. Then obviously this Los Angeles show, there was a lot of music and a small stage setup, to going on to something like the Performing Arts Center in Abu Dhabi, which was another competition we participated. And this is again early 2000s. We are trying to get new design, obviously a lot more fluidity into the internal spaces to make it seamlessly integrated. And these started to change the repertoire a little bit, which then led to, as you know, Ganzhou Opera House. And then moving on, obviously, a very recognizable building is the Hyder Reviv. And And here is an auditorium inside the Heidelberg, which I quite like. It's very simple, very, very neat, one material only, not too much. Call it the monochrome or whatever, from the steps to the seating to everything is in wood. Some other buildings, this is the auditorium in Nanjing for the Youth Olympic. Some other views. Changsha, this is built as well. You can see different language. This one is in Bonn, Germany. And you can see a different language for the theaters here. It's another, perspective of a different mood. Cultural center in Qingdao, Qingdao, sorry. And culture and art in Amman, in Jordan, that we designed a long time ago. Bogota. So there's obviously a lot of repertoire of work and design that are constantly being experimented. Most of them, not all of them, have been built. As you can see, some of them have been built, but the idea of finding new solutions is constant. And I hope in this group, I don't know, 15, 20 people of you are able to create some new ideas. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but I think the first initial start off should be something that you are inspired by, that you can think you can bring into architecture, rather than looking at architecture to replicate it. I think that's the message. And finally, I mean, as I said, this whole thing, the Newman of architecture, which is part of this book called Forever Wonder, the first chapter, which I explained to you, the first introduction and the chapter is there. It's going to come out later, hopefully this year, so you can have a look. So that's it from my lecture. I hope it's useful. I'll take some questions if you have any.
Thank you. Let me stop the screen sharing. What is it? Okay, you stopped it. So first of all, thank you very much, Subhati. I'm quite happy that at the very end you showed not only theaters but also a couple of more temporary, let's say, solutions that you guys at ZA designed, because we have been discussing on Tuesday during the first session and today during the second one about what is the final goal from a design perspective. And we are leaving the students, which are 13, by the way, bit of freedom in the sense that there is this building, this envelope, let's say this shelter, to use one of the words used today. And what happens inside can span a bit in between performative art to theater. So not to end up in a mandatory way with, let's say, an auditorium, okay? We ask, of course, for seats and so on and so forth, but there is a bit of flexibility in that. Is there any question? There is no mark, so there is no need to look down at the desk.
Any questions, any thoughts? It doesn't have to be questions. Anything that you are thinking of, most welcome.
So you have seen let's say in the first part there was some description via the video of the tower in Milano from Zaha, from a computational. But today we had a session on computational design, for example. So that one was particularly relevant in that respect. A few examples of theaters which are different from the ones that I showed you. So you see even an extended repertoire from ZA, from others. But in terms of design strategy, the kind of holistic approach that Subhati, you may correct me, but this articulation or interarticulation of subsystem, as Schumacher calls it, no? So to go from the general scale to the detail, and everything is referring one to each other. So try to keep this in mind, because it becomes also part of the consistency of your language. Okay. So as we said today, we have to go down to the technical detail. So you will need to have this in mind. Now, I know that his lectures are particularly clear, but I hope there is some question. Otherwise, I have to look at the PhD student in the room who is shaking his head. Guys, is there any doubt?
And it doesn't need to be related to the theater project. It could be architectural questions, about architecture. What do you think about it?
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, which is extremely generic, but part of the module is based on what one of our PhDs is exploring, which is Henrik here, which is conversational architecture, but on a more shallow level. What is your take of this impact of AI in architecture? Because now it's the only, not the main, it's the only topic in any kind of lecture, discussion, classroom, AI.
Well, I think it's great assistance. And I think AI will make a lot of what we have to do as a rigorous hard work way, way simpler. Which is, all this computation, all this rationalization, all of this can be and we are already using it, You can ask the AI to give you a script quickly, to give me a script of panelization, give me a script. All these little things are getting more efficient with AI. So that I think we are very lucky that it is progressing. That will make our life as designers much easier. But I'm also not, that's the positive side of it, but I'm never really convinced that, you're going to sit on your desk and ask AI to design something for you. Because it's not going to create anything that it doesn't know. So there's a fundamental difference between computers and human brain. And this was very rightly pointed out by Einstein. And he said that, computers are impeccably accurate, faster, whereas human brains are inaccurate, but brilliant, because it allows the cross connectivity of ideas. That's how you get new ideas. AI is based on a generic system idea. So generic system ideas do not give you new ideas unless it is able to merge different, it can start merging a plant to architecture. And you can ask it to, but it'll give you a result, something else. The last bit of it, which I am very passionate about, is design. So I want to be the guy who's designing, that is me. That's me personally. I don't want AI to do a design and me doing the dog work for it. So I'm very clear that way that, the conceptual idea should be from that we can use the AI to make it work. Whereas sometimes I see that people go on AI and, all these platforms and try to get an image or a render, and then they spend the whole term looking at that render and trying to get to that render. Whereas in actual design, it doesn't happen that way. In actual design, if you have an idea, your first sketch and your last sketch is hugely different, because you create the first sketch and you realize that, hey, it's not working. Functionally, it's not working. Some other ways it's not. So you start improving that first sketch. So by the time you finish on the last sketch, it is very different. Whereas what I start seeing when people go into platforms like DALL-E and all this is that they immediately they've got their final product in front of them that they're aiming towards. And I think that's a problem, because the learning gets reduced. So you don't spend any time learning anything else but a tool to get there. So I think this is my perspective on it.
Yes, it sounds to me also an outcome of the current times, in the sense that we get everything fast, as you said. You go on Instagram, you get content. You go on YouTube, you get content.
Yeah.
but you buy something here on Taobao and you get it after 24 hours. So there is kind of, or Meituan if you want in 20 minutes. So it's a bit of a fast food approach if you want, which of course doesn't help.
Yeah, which we all know
Yeah.
leads to high sugar and high fat. So
Yeah.
we know that, but yet we eat it because it's been promoted. So I think there is ways to use it very smartly. And I think firstly, as I said, earlier we had to sit down and write every script. We don't need to. Now you have a broader script in which you plug in multiple elements of the scripts just by asking them to code it
Can
in
help, yeah.
Python.
Can
And
help
that's brilliant.
automatizing some of the processes. The more
absolutely.
technical one eventually, the less creative, but more technical and repetitive one even first. In fact, today we had a bit of a session on computation design, and they can now go on DeepSeek and get half of the Grasshopper script basically done. But you have to know what to ask.
Yeah,
That
it's
remains.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And it makes process faster. It makes less time for us to spend on these kind of things, automatization. And I think that must be used. And I don't know what is the school's direction on this, but I personally feel it should be allowed to automatize as much as we can.
Yeah. I mean, the university has, of course, a drive towards AI on all levels. And then let's say that each module, for example, can have a different approach. But in our case, as long as the use is declared, it's absolutely fine. It's like using Rhino. You use Rhino or DeepSeek or ChatGPT. Guys, one question that if I would be you, I would ask Subharti here. Because from next week, you have to start coming up with concept, for example. Okay. And in any case, the concept has to lead towards a specific function of your building. Okay, so it's not going to be a fish market, it's going to be a theater. Well, where to start from with a theater or with a performing space? I would ask, for example. So I'm asking Subharti, where would you start from? Let's say that tomorrow morning you have a competition for a theater and you get assigned with leading the team and developing a concept.
I think I would first, usually, obviously there's the function part of it, which is how many spaces I need and so on. But at the same time, I would start with looking at, what is your inspiration? I think that's very, like, why did you want to, like, the first principle, like, what is it that you're thinking that it should start with? You have to choose different starting points for a concept. And that could be sometimes at a very small scale, you can take this concept and make it larger and larger. Or you can start from a broader, higher scale, what it might be in terms of looking at the city, the context, what is the right thing that should be here, and then you go into deeper and deeper. So, as I said, that maybe your first sketch will be very different from where you land up in the end. So, when you start exploring, so I think that open-mindedness that my first sketch doesn't need to be the best sketch. The first sketch needs to be the heart of the idea. Just like you have your passion. The first sketch is that passion. What it looks like, it doesn't matter. That first little spark of inspiration is what is important.
Good. Now you know where to start from. Guys, is there any question? Nope.
No? Okay.
Alan? No? Anything out of... wait.
Yeah.
In different stage, we will have different conversation with AI. Now we more focus on the concept. Maybe we can use GPT and DeepSeek help us to very quickly have the math model, the picture to show the shape, what we want to do. But after that, I think when we want to dig our design more deeply, and we need to find more data, maybe from the user or the performer, help us to maybe change the space or to have the conversation in our maybe review or the final review. So I think which points we will more care about in the after concept conversation. I mean, maybe the conversation for space, the conversation for user, for performer.
Let me
David,
let
can
me
you
give
just
you.
clarify it because
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
sound
Let me
is
give
very
you,
low.
let me
Yeah.
give you, let me give you a little bit of also of a background. As I said, part of the module is supported by one of our PhDs, which is working on a conversational architecture. Now, I'm not give you the whole lecture because this is expertise and it would take 2 hours. But basically, how would you summarize for Supartie your research in a nutshell? Sorry, he got error 404 of our PhD.
But
got
what is
stuck.
the question? What is
So
the
the
question?
question is now they are on the conceptual level, okay? And again, this branch of the AI is called conversational architecture. He's asking you, if I understand correctly, please tell me if I'm not, on what would you focus after the conceptual stage? If you would focus on this approach being applied to the users means the person attending the show, or the performers, for example. Is that correct?
Maybe I can.
Can you come here? Because the mic is here. It was much easier also for him to get the point.
Yeah.
Because now we have the opinion, it's between human and AI, we want to use machine to change the relationship between human and AI. So let it me feel about I want to create the process, not only about my design process, still about when we finish the building, the people use this building. It is also the process. So all of them process will have different conversation. So I want to focus many points in the different process, but until now, maybe I just really a little reading. So if you do you have some opinion about the different process we can care about different opinion to have the conversation between human and AI by the machine? Maybe the machine is maybe the machine is circulation, experience, or architecture. Yeah.
Machine is sick.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So
Define what do you mean by machine?
The machine, I think, just maybe not very.
do you mean automatization?
Yeah, maybe it's not a very serious machine. I think maybe architecture is a machine. The circulation still is it's like the.
No, architecture is not a machine.
Yeah, but it's just I know. In this background, I just think a human and AI by the machine, but still can human and AI by the architecture to change the relationship. The machine just to replace it, I think.
No, that's where I think, the machines are there to assist us to make it better. And
But maybe maybe the machine is help us to select the data from user. Maybe we can use.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It will assist you in any form you ask it to assist. As far as I know, there's no tool that is creating something new. If you ask a Zaha, design me a Zaha house, right?
Yeah.
It is only going to give you what, in my experience, it gives you a bad version of a house that I've probably known that we have designed in the office. Or if you ask it to merge a Zaha House with a Libeskind, something, it'll only give you a bad version of both of them together. Maybe there is some idea in it, I don't know. But most of the time, visual graphics that we are seeing is very, very. If there is anything that DALL-E and all these have improved, it is the graphic quality. So it is not the architecture; it's the graphic quality. So the way they blend the colors. So any object that they take, the color blending is appealing, and that is why people are attracted to it. So if anything that has improved in this process of DALL-E and there's few others going around, it's the graphic quality and the color tones that you see visually. So be very careful when you ask a machine. My only suggestion is when you ask a machine to do something, it performs an act, but you must be able to recognize what is good and what is not good. Just because the picture looks good doesn't mean that the architecture is good. Maybe it's just the graphic quality that's superior. And we do it, and Photoshop has a generative AI. You take your building there, you change the whole context and you use it. But again, you can do all that. And it's great for fashion design. It's great for, advertisement. You don't have to travel to Argentina to do that graphic. But is it really great for architecture? Because architecture is non-movable. You have a site. You can paint, a deserted site with a Nordic color code, and sell it to a client. But in reality, you'll never get the Nordic sky. You'll never get the Nordic colors in that site. But for a painting or for a, music, Bach could have played the music one night in Tokyo and the same music one night in Berlin, another night. And it could be the same music, but you can't do that with architecture. So I think that's some fundamental things that you must keep in mind being an architect. Of course, use the tool, use the tool and use it to also use your brain to recognize what the tool is good for. And therefore, you will get better output of the tool and you'll get better output of your work, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anka? No? Good. Then it's 4:30, more or less. So I
Yes.
suppose 8:30 in London.
Yeah.
Let me stop the recording.